There's a scandal in Ottawa right now with the potential to bring down the government. It's all about the administration of a program intended to help youth and charities through the pandemic, and yet not many youth seem to know that much about it. The WE scandal. The scandal centers around a charity called WE Charity. If you've gone through high school, you probably know a lot about them already. You might know them by their name, Free the Children. That's what they used to be called. Maybe you know of them as Me to We. That's their for-profit arm. But if you don't know about them, chances are you still know about something called WE Days. WE Days are giant stadium-sized events for teens featuring celebrities and live music, all intended to hype up teens about the chance to do good in their community.
Everybody do the WE Day dance.
And interestingly, one of the speakers at the first one in Toronto in 2007 was the now Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. WE Charity is also closely linked with a for-profit social enterprise called Me to We. Me to We does a variety of things. One of them is what some people have called voluntourism. Basically, you can pay Me to We to take you on a trip out to some developing nation where you'll go on day trips to help build a school or dig a well or something like that. They're giant team building activities. Usually they're geared towards students, although Me to We also does sell them as kind of holidays / getaways for corporations. Yeah.
That would be the worst. Oh,
For the cameras. They also make curriculum materials for things like leadership classes and so on. And finally, they help corporations add a little bit of that WE glow to their brand for a price. If you sponsor WE Charity or you work with Me to We, you'll be able to get a lot more say as to what goes into things like WE Day. WE Days will often feature speakers from the corporations that sponsored the event, talking about what they are doing in the community. This description of WE Day is from a teacher's op-ed. We saw a video about a group of seniors having a life-changing moment at a Cineplex theater, and learned the surprising degree to which the keg is committed to alleviating poverty, one $30 steak at a time. Some corporations have also been able to dictate a little bit of what goes into those educational materials. Me to We allegedly rewrote a lot of their materials to be more favorable to one of their sponsors, Dow Chemical. This from Vice News' article about Trudeau's connections with WE. The curriculum prepared by WE suggests teachers ask students questions like, how do Dow scientists approach problems? But in the end, a lot of the pitch behind Me to We is that most of its profits, in fact, in some years up to 90%, go directly back into WE Charity. The idea is that while other charities have to deal with the whims of their donors, WE Charity will always have revenue in the form of Me to We.
It's like a giant Ouroboros of money.
All right, so now that we got that down, let's turn our minds back to April. With the pandemic, some students were having trouble finding jobs for that summer. At the same time, charities and not-for-profits were having trouble raising money and were struggling to get volunteers. And the government proposed to address this with the
Canada Student Service Grant.
The CSSG.
The CSSG would give a grant of $1,000 for every 100 hours of volunteer work that each applicant completed, up to $5,000. So for the first 100 hours, you get $1,000, and then you do another 100 hours, you get another $1,000. And the other thing the program would do is it would give $12,000 to any teacher that recruited and managed students in their area. Anyways, that's the program that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau launched on June 25th, and there was only one kind of additional catch in there that caught everyone's eyes. The program would be administered to by WE Charity. Okay, so it turns out that Trudeau's history with WE Charity is actually a lot more extensive than just speaking at that first WE Day. Trudeau's actually spoken at several WE Days since then. He spoke at a WE Day in 2012, just before he launched his campaign or his bid to become leader of the Liberal Party. The first public appearance he made after being sworn in as Prime Minister was at a WE Day in Ottawa. Trudeau's brother, Sasha, and his mother, Margaret, have both been paid to speak at WE Days. Most of those times they were paid by Me to We to speak, although once Margaret Trudeau was actually paid by WE Charity. But it's something that WE Charity denied until journalists dug it up. Trudeau's wife, Sophie Gregoire, also has spoken at several WE events, including WE Day London this year, where her expenses to fly out there were paid for by WE Charity. Oh, and Sophie also hosts a podcast with WE called WE Wellbeing. And finally, not in the Trudeau family, but Bill Morneau, the finance minister, his daughter actually works for WE. And in 2018, allegedly, WE employees were actually told to attend one of his holiday parties basically just to make up the numbers.
Everybody do the We Day dance.
And Bill Morneau and Justin Trudeau were both people who had to sign off on the We deal. So the opposition and the media started asking questions. Questions like, why was this being administered by We when there are a lot of other organizations in Canada that would seem to have a similar reach to We, even more reach and more experience with programs like this than We? Why was this being farmed off at all? Surely this is something that the public service could do. After all, the public service did do the CERB. Why hadn't Trudeau and Morneau recused themselves, basically stepping back from the conversation about that and let the rest of the cabinet pass off on it instead? But in the end, the real question is, did the government pick WE Charity to administer this program just because Justin Trudeau has links with them? Since the start of this controversy, the government has insisted that it was the public service, basically the people in government who stick around regardless of which party's in charge and are actually responsible for the day-to-day running of things, that it was the public service that originally proposed WE Charity to run this program. In fact, the government says the public servants told them We was the only group that could run it, to the point where the program would either have to be with We or not happen at all. This narrative seems to have been backed up by testimony from public servants, though it does still leave questions that the opposition are picking at. Justin Trudeau even says he only found out WE Charity would be administering the program on May 8th, 3 days after We was told that they could begin building the program and incurring expenses. Trudeau says that he realized then it would look like a conflict of interest, and so sent the program back to the public service for a review, just to check that WE Charity was the only organization that could do it. The opposition has argued that that doesn't explain why, 2 weeks later, when the public service came back and said WE was the only one, Trudeau still didn't recuse himself from the final cabinet discussion on the issue. But finally, with all the bad publicity, WE Charity pulled out of the deal and threw the whole program back to the public service, who is now administering to it, apparently quite capably. But in the meantime, other questions were starting to be raised. Volunteer Canada, an organization that links people up with volunteer opportunities in Canada, asked if it was really actually ethical to pay people for volunteer work. Canadian labor lawyers have suggested that the grant is a sort of payment for services, which means that because it's just $1,000 for 100 hours, it's below minimum wage. Eyebrows got raised over whether or not it was ethical to pay teachers to recruit students into the program. And the Conservative Party and a whole bunch of other people actually suggested that the money would have just been better spent on the already extant Canadian Summer Jobs Program. And a whole bunch of other programs too. There's a petition going around right now for the government to reallocate the funds to increasing the Canada Emergency Student Benefit, which provides financial support up to $1,250 a month, or $2,000 if you have a disability or a dependent, to students struggling to find work due to the pandemic. But kind of the biggest question that comes out of all of this is just why? Why did the government make such an obvious mistake? Trudeau himself has been found twice in violation of Canada's conflict of interest laws by the Ethics Commissioner. After each of those incidents, Justin Trudeau promised to do better. So a lot of people, both outside and inside the Liberal Party, are wondering, why has this happened again? And hey, the opposition parties seem to be loving it. The Conservative Party has called for the resignation of both Prime Minister Trudeau and the Finance Minister Bill Morneau. Although, funnily, they haven't called for the government to be brought down. That has been called for by the Bloc Québécois, who say that if Trudeau and Morneau are not gone by September, there's a good chance that they will try to bring down the government and force an election. There are a few reasons why this issue should be important to people outside of the Ottawa sphere. For one thing, this program affects students. Apparently over 25,000 students signed up for the program, and now the program, despite being managed by the public service, is on hold while the government decides whether or not they want to scrap it, continue it, or modify it into something else. Those are people's real summer plans halfway through the summer that have been thrown into jeopardy. But there's another kind of juicier element to this. Back last year, when Justin Trudeau won the election, his second government, it was a minority, which means that there's a good chance that at any moment, the government could fall and an election be forced. That hasn't happened because so far the other parties, at least one of them, has voted with the government on important issues like budgets or a confidence motion. But that could all fall apart if all of the parties decide that this issue is big enough for them to bring down the government and force that election. The Bloc has already called for that, but the Conservatives haven't. The reason for that is that the Conservatives right now are in the middle of a leadership race. They want to get rid of Andrew Scheer. They don't think that he did a good job during the last election, so they want to replace him with someone else. They're going to wait until that person is installed before they decide to call an election. But when that new leader is in place, the Liberals will probably be left with just one remaining party to dance with, the NDP. And there's a good chance that the NDP would then be able to force the Liberals further to the left on more progressive issues. The government has already announced bringing in something similar to EI for contract workers, which is something that the NDP has been calling for years now. And who knows, maybe out of this we'll get something more progressive than what we came into it with. There is an example of this already happening. 2 weeks ago, the government said that they weren't going to hold a public inquiry into the Nova Scotia killings. But after just a weekend of uproar from the families of those killed, and from a few Liberal backbench MPs, the government changed its mind and said that it was going to hold a public inquiry, even though that would be costlier and would take longer. And honestly, I think the reason why is because right now the Liberal government can't deal with any more bad press. So, just a little tip. Now's the time to push for your agenda. Don't tell anyone I said that. I think we're done. I think we are done. Now, there's one other thing is I wanted to quickly film like a thing for
This piece was based on a whole lot of articles, radio, and podcasts from an amazing bunch of journalists. I've linked to a lot of my larger sources on my blog at blog.lafe.ca. A lot of the stuff about Me to We was drawn from a Vice News article by Justin Ling. Do check it out. And my understanding of We Day was helped a lot by an op-ed by a teacher in the Tyee. We Charity took issue with it at the time, though not for any reasons I found to be particularly important. Anyways, see you next week. And in the meantime, everybody do the We Day.